Okay, here we go. But also there will be a time at the end of the presentation for questions. So let's get started. So what is intuitive eating? This is something that you may have heard this word before, you may have not heard this phrase before, but essentially it means to make peace with all foods. It means that there's no restrictive dieting in our diet, and also it means that instead of seeing food as good or bad, it's just listening to your body's hunger cues and your fullness cues so that you can satisfy your specific needs. So a little bit of history about intuitive eating is that two registered dietitians founded this in 1995. So it is relatively new, but there has been extensive research as to how this can benefit people whenever they start intuitive eating. And the goal of this diet is to heal one's relationship with food. So we will go to the next slide. And this next slide is about restrictive dieting. So restrictive dieting is whenever one specific food group is cut out for the purpose of losing weight. Common types of restrictive diet include keto, Mediterranean, vegan, Atkins, and the raw food diet. Keto and vegan and Atkins are probably the most popular and probably what you have heard of the most. And each of these are more widely known as fad diets. So fad diets are the diets that become increasingly popular as more people try them. So as you've seen in probably the past 2 to 5 years, the ketogenic diet has become increasingly popular. And that's actually the first one that we're going to talk about. This next slide, though, just to kind of give a nutrition introduction, is going to be on macronutrients, just in case anyone doesn't know what that is. And so that throughout the presentation, you're going to hear me refer to healthy fats, lean protein, and carbs a lot. And so I want you to be able to know exactly what I'm referring to. So in the picture, in these few pictures, you'll see that healthy fats, there's even chocolate on there. So for people that have a sweet tooth like me, you really enjoy that you can have chocolate and that it is considered in moderation a healthy fat. You'll see avocado on there, eggs, olive oils, that kind of thing. For the protein picture, you'll see that there is obviously a ton of meat on there, but also some plant-based proteins. And then what I would say is probably the most useful image in this entire slide is the carbohydrate image. So you'll see on the left side that there are simple carbs, which are going to be the types of foods that are very processed. They probably have a lot of added sugars in them. And the reason why they're called simple carbs is because they break down in your body quickest and they turn into sugar the most. And so they often, whenever they're digested quicker, they leave you feeling more hungry towards the end. So these are the simple carbs, and you'll see in the picture cookies, sugar sweetened beverages such as Cokes, potato chips, white bread, candy, that kind of thing. And then you'll see on the right, there are complex carbs, which are going to be our vegetables and fruits and whole grain items that are going to leave you full for longer and often have more fiber and less refined sugar in them. And so with our first diet, we're going to talk about the keto diet. This one's super popular, so if there are a lot of questions, great, and hopefully I can answer all of them. For the ones that I may not be able to answer right now, there are links for each of these diets where all the information came from that are from registered dietitians. So they are reputable sources and are from experts themselves. So with that, we'll get into the breakdown of keto diet. As you can see on this plate right here, we've got that in the keto diet, it's often broken down into 10% of carbs, 20% protein, and 70% fat. The goal of the keto diet is to have weight loss, and it is most of the time used for rapid weight loss. A lot of people use it for a quote unquote quick fix, and it is a fad diet because it just has increasingly, as I said before, become popular. The carbohydrate intake in the diet is less than or equal to 50 grams of carbohydrates. So you may wonder, what does 50 grams of carbohydrates look like? Well, on average for a 2,000 calorie diet, we are recommended to have at least 100 grams of carbohydrates, which is equivalent to about 8 slices of bread. And that is just to simply keep our brain functioning, to give us the energy that we need throughout the day. So if you cut that in half to 50 grams, that you can imagine that that's going to lessen your energy, and also just probably leave you hungry. So the question is, why do they limit carbs in this diet? So carbohydrates are the main source of energy for our body, because they're broken down into glucose, which our body uses the quickest for energy, to keep us going throughout the day. Without the glucose in our body, though, we use ketones, which puts our body into fat burning mode. So that's kind of that's where the name ketogenic diet comes from, is because on this diet, your body's burning ketones for energy, which switches your body into fat burning mode, which hence the incentive for the quick weight loss. So that is the keto diet, and the next diet is the Atkins diet. It is similar to the keto diet in the fact that it is a low carbohydrate diet. And if you've ever dieted before, you've probably heard of the Atkins diet. It has been around for longer, and a lot of people use these. I'm going to see the chat. Okay, here we go. I want to make sure I've looked at the chat and keep an eye on that. So the purpose of the Atkins diet is to lose and then maintain your weight, decrease blood pressure, and boost your energy. It differs from the keto diet because as the Atkins diet goes on, there is an option to increase your carbohydrate intake. So as you'll see right here, the Atkins diet is split into 4 different phases. Whereas you saw with the keto diet, the carbohydrate for the entire diet, you could have a maximum of 50 grams of carbohydrates. Whereas with the Atkins diet, you start out at about 12 to 15 grams of net carbs. And those are specifically, you want to get those from non-starchy vegetables. And that's your first phase. So if you don't know what net carbs are, that's okay. I'll explain them real quick. Net carbs are the carbs that, if you look on a nutrition food label, you'll see that there's a total carbohydrates, dietary fiber, added sugar. So net carbs are if there are 20 grams of total carbohydrates and then 5 grams of dietary fiber, then the amount of net carbs that you have are 15. So it's just the total amount of carbs minus the fiber and minus the sugar. So on the Atkins diet, you start out at about 12 to 15 grams of net carbs, and that's going to be around 10% of your diet. In the second phase, you continue with only 10% of carbohydrates from the diet, but you start to introduce fruits, which are a source of carbohydrates, and then some starchy vegetables, which the starchy vegetables are going to be things like potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, those kind of things that aren't considered green leafy vegetables, such as spinach, broccoli, kale, lettuce, those kinds of things. So then in the third phase, you will start adding about 10 grams of carbohydrates each week to your diet. And what this kind of looks like, the Atkins diet, as you can see by the 4 phases and by the option to add carbohydrates, is more specific to however your body processes carbs, really. And so you're allowed to have a specific range which keeps you from gaining the weight back that you've lost. I hope I worded that correctly. So in the third phase, you would add about 10 grams of carbohydrates each week. And then you remain in this phase until you reach your goal weight that you're aiming for. So if my goal weight is 155 pounds and I'm consuming 20 grams of carbs, then I can maybe increase to 30 grams of carbs. But in the 4th phase, you'll see that you want to kind of figure out a range of carbs that prevents the weight gain. So for example, maybe my maximum amount of carbs on the Atkins diet is 60 grams of carbs to keep me at 155 pounds. This is just an example so that we can kind of get a realistic version of what this would look like. And then you stay in that fourth phase for however long you stay on the Atkins diet is the idea. And a lot of times you still are in a low range of carbohydrates. Most people, if you start out at 12 to 15 grams and then you add 10 grams each week, then you'd be looking at about 60 grams of carbs at the end of about four to 5 weeks, which still is a very low amount of carbs. As we discussed earlier, just a standard recommendation for the average adult is 100 grams of carbs. So keto and Atkins, usually, for example, you may stay around 50 to 60 grams, which is still pretty low. With that, our next diet is the raw food diet. So this one is one that is probably newer and also isn't as widely practiced here in the South, but I assume everyone is not from the South. And so you've also probably heard about it from wherever you're from. And so the raw food diet, the reason why people go on this diet is because there is a belief that cooking destroys all the food enzymes. And so raw food gives our bodies the best amount of nutrients instead of cooking it out. And then the purpose of this is to lose weight. In order to adhere to this diet, the consumer has to eat 75% of raw foods. So 75% of your diet has to come from specifically raw foods. And then an interesting fact right here is that all raw foods are allowed, even raw meat. And so we'll talk about later for each of these diets, kind of risk factors and short-term and long-term outcomes. But obviously with raw meat, if you eat sushi, you have an option to eat raw meat. But on the raw food diet, there have been people known to put raw chicken in a smoothie and stuff like that. So an obvious risk of the raw food diet, if you do consume the raw meat, is that you can have foodborne illnesses, which can lead to just a lot of sickness. Also in the raw food diet, there have been studies that have shown that consuming, for example, consuming raw potatoes or raw bananas all the time, which it has led to weight gain. So this diet isn't exactly very reliable, and it also, as we'll see later, there is a caveat to the belief that heat destroys all the food enzymes. Our next diet is the vegan diet. And so in the vegan diet, as you can assume by the name, the one that we're going to discuss here, I want to be clear, there are a few different types of vegan diets, but here we're going to discuss the specific vegan diet that does not allow meat of any type, even fish, because there are some vegan diets that do allow fish, but for this reason, we're not going to discuss that diet right now, just strictly the vegan diet that allows the consumption of fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts. So in this diet, you abstain from any foods derived from animals, which looks like any meat, any dairy products that are from animals, and then also some vegans do not consume honey because it comes from bees. That isn't a requirement of the vegan diet, but that is something that some people adhere to. So the purpose of the vegan diet is to decrease obesity, decrease the risk of heart disease, and also lower the blood pressure. A lot of people choose to become vegan for ethical, environmental, or religious purposes. So a lot of people that are on the vegan diet, you'll see they do the vegan diet for those specific reasons. And then you also see that the way that so a breakdown of how do they get their macronutrients in the vegan diet. So in the vegan diet, their carbohydrates come from fruits and vegetables. The healthy fats that they consume come from nuts. And then their protein is plant-based, and it's going to be legumes. So legumes are any kind of peas, beans. You'll see in the background right here that's what I've included as our picture is chickpeas, black-eyed peas, kidney beans, black beans, any kind of peas. Those are going to be the source of protein on the vegan diet. And as I said before, the purpose of this is to decrease obesity, risk of heart disease, and also decrease blood pressure. Our last fad diet is the Mediterranean diet. This is commonly known as a diet that is used for people that are at risk for heart disease because of the types of foods that you eat. On this diet, the food that we eat is mostly plant-based foods such as whole grains, vegetables, legumes, fruits, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. And the main source of fat for this diet and why it is a lot of times recommended for a heart healthy diet is because olive oil is the main source of added fat. But as we know, olive oil a lot of things, in excess can be bad for you. Everything needs to be done in moderation. So we'll see later that even though olive oil is a healthier fat, it's healthier than Crisco or 100% margarine or anything like that, or vegetable oil, it is still, whenever it is consumed in great quantities, it still can put someone at risk for heart disease. In the Mediterranean diet, they limit meat, specifically red meat, and dairy because they are believed to increase LDL cholesterol and triglycerides. LDL cholesterol is what some would say is the bad cholesterol. So it's the cholesterol that builds up in our arteries and is known at increased levels to put people at risk for heart disease. Triglycerides are also a type of fat that builds up in our arteries and puts us at risk for heart disease. And both of these come from types of foods that are high in saturated fat, are processed, or have a lot of added sugar. And so maybe a lot of fast food or a lot of chips or things like that. Let me see. So where someone raised their hand. So as I said before, the primary goal is to just decrease the risk of heart disease in the Mediterranean diet. So I know that all of these diets are fad diets, and they are a type of restrictive diets because in one way or another, there's at least one food group that is restricted, whereas mostly, as we've seen with the Atkins and the Keto Diet, carbohydrates are restricted. In the Mediterranean diet, certain types of fats are restricted. In our next slide, there we go. So this next slide is we're going to debunk the myths of fad diets. So we'll just start right off with the keto diet. In the keto diet, there are a lot of people that kind of the mindset is that carbs are bad for you. This is not necessarily what everyone thinks, but it is a common, and as you'll see in the article that I included, a common misconception is that carbohydrates are bad for you. But as we stated before, carbs are not bad for you because that is where our energy comes from. And then for the vegan diet, the myth for that is that you can often meet your calories that you need for it and your recommended dietary allowance for vitamins and minerals. But without meat and dairy products, you miss out on key vitamins such as vitamin D and vitamin B12, and then minerals such as iron and folate, which are super important to our diet. And so with the vegan diet, it is difficult to meet your calorie and recommended dietary allowance for vitamins and minerals. In the raw food diet, which I found this, to me, the raw food diet is probably one of the most interesting ones because it is newer and it's newer, so to me it's interesting. But in the raw food diet, the myth that we discussed is that cooking destroys enzymes, but it's been proven in studies that cooking actually increases the availability of nutrients such as antioxidants. which the two main antioxidants that cooking allows our body to, whenever we cook foods, enzymes allow our body to digest, are lycopene and beta carotene. So lycopene is an antioxidant that is found in tomatoes, are like the number one source of lycopene, and it is a protective antioxidant against cancer. And beta carotene can be found in any red, orange, or yellow fruits or vegetables, and is a protector against heart disease. So, so you'll find beta carotene and lycopene both in tomatoes, red bell peppers, apples, yellow squash, those kinds of things. So the myth, again, for the raw food diet is that cooking actually increases the availability of lycopene and beta carotene, which are super important to preventing cancer, heart disease, and just keeping us in general healthy from the common flu and things like that. So it is super important that we do cook our foods and are allowed to get these antioxidants into our body. With the Atkins diet, the myth is that we have to go down to 10 to 15 grams of carbs to lose weight, when in reality that is that's not true. You do not have to go down to 10 grams of carbohydrates to lose weight. There are other ways that we can lose weight, and that can be found through exercise, making a more balanced meal, and also consuming more complex carbohydrates instead of those simple carbohydrates that we talked about earlier. For the Mediterranean diet, as we talked about, the limit is to limit meat, and specifically red meat and dairy in the diet. But actually, red meat and dairy consumption have been found to, whenever they're consumed in moderation, have been found to not increase LDL cholesterol and triglycerides, therefore not put one at a higher risk for heart disease. So you may wonder, specifically whenever I say red meat in moderation, what does that mean, or what does that look like realistically? So realistically, that it's 3 ounces of red meat is considered a serving, and what 3 ounces typically can look like. So if you go to the steakhouse, the smallest size of steak that they normally allow you to get or offer is a 6 ounce. So that would be 2 servings of red meat. And then so your average hamburger is about 3 ounces. So your average hamburger is about one serving of red meat. And it's recommended not to consume more than 3 to 5 servings of red meat per day. And then moderate dairy consumption is categorized as not consuming more than three 8-ounce servings of dairy a day. And so that can look like 8-ounce servings of milk, or maybe cheese or things like that. And so here next, we will talk about the risk factors for each diet. So for the keto diet, the short-term risk factor is the keto flu. And the keto flu, some symptoms are those of the common flu: fatigue, fever, migraine, things like that. And then the other short-term effects of keto diet are constipation, bad breath, and trouble sleeping. The bad breath is interesting because the reason why a lot of people on keto have bad breath is because whenever you have an abundance of ketones in your body, that actually does come out in your breath, and it causes you to have kind of an aluminum breath smell, if that makes sense. So that is one of the short-term effects. But the main short-term effect of keto is the keto flu, which, as I said before, feels like the average flu, and it doesn't feel too good. Long-term with the keto, though, there are some pretty serious risk factors, such as kidney stones, liver disease, and then vitamin and mineral deficiencies that I've listed. And with the Atkins diet, the short-term effects are dizziness, fatigue, and nausea. Long-term effects include kidney problems. So as expected, the keto and Atkins diet, because they are very similar, have similar short-term and long-term effects. But the Atkins diet does not have the short-term effect of a flu, because normally the keto flu sets in after you've been on the diet for about 2 weeks. It progressively just kind of increases and gets worse over the 2 weeks. And with the Atkins diet, because you are on that 10 to 15 grams of carbs for such a short amount of time, a lot of times there isn't enough time to develop the what we would call the keto flu. I see the chat right here. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So our next risk factor is going to be with the raw food diet. So as I said before, short term is possible foodborne illness, which foodborne illness can result in death. So can also, be a long-term effect. Some more long-term effects include protein calorie malnutrition, because as we discussed, if you're only consuming raw fruits and vegetables, and if you're not consuming starchy vegetables, because with all of these diets, the goal is to lose weight. And so you're probably consuming raw non-starchy vegetables such as spinach, things like that, which don't have many calories in them. And then also consuming raw fruit, which does not have any calories. So that can, and both of those also don't have many, they're not abundant in protein. And so long-term, it can lead to protein calorie malnutrition, and then the vitamin deficiencies that I've listed. For the Mediterranean diet, some short-term effects are elevated triglycerides due to the increased consumption of olive oil, and that can lead to weight gain. So although the goal is to lose weight with all of these diets, in the Mediterranean diet specifically, it has been linked to weight gain because of the excess amount of olive oil that's consumed, and which also elevates the triglycerides. Long-term risk factors for the Mediterranean diet include iron and calcium deficiencies, and also a possibility of alcohol abuse. So in the Mediterranean diet, it is recommended that you consume 8 ounces of alcohol, whether that be, mostly it is wine, because as the name kind of gives away, it is Mediterranean. So in the Mediterranean, they consume wine more than beer or anything like that, or any kind of liquor or anything. So in the Mediterranean diet, it is recommended that at dinner you consume 8 ounces of alcohol, which is recommended to be wine. And so we've all heard the saying that red wine can actually be a health benefit, which is true and can be in the link for the article for the Mediterranean diet. They do discuss some benefits of red wine, but something that can occur over time if you are on the Mediterranean diet for very long is a dependence on alcohol, which meaning that in your mind, I have to have 8 ounces of wine with my meal or my health is going to decline, which in turn is categorized as a type of alcohol abuse because it is alcohol dependency. So that is a pretty serious long-term effect of the Mediterranean diet. For the vegan diet, there are no short-term effects because the vegan diet, it does cut out meat and dairy, and then as I said, some people do not consume honey on the vegan diet. But short-term, there aren't any immediate effects. Long-term, however, the effects can include protein malnourishment because a lot of people don't realize that there are plant-based forms of protein, like we talked about with the beans and peas, but they just consume only fruits, vegetables, and legumes and stuff and nuts and stuff like that. So their protein intake is decreased. So long term, there can be protein malnourishment, as well as vitamin B12 and D deficiencies because of the lack of meat and dairy intake. But the one common risk factor among each one of these and with any fad diet is the development of an eating disorder. So in the definition of an eating disorder is the abnormal or obsessive eating habits that negatively affect one's relationship with food, body image, and their mental status. You'll see that the National Eating Disorder Association reports that 20 to 25% of quote unquote normal dieters develop an eating disorder. And you may wonder what normal dieting means. So what that looks like is obsessively using MyFitnessPal, any of those kind of apps that are going to put you on a calorie restriction, and also can develop into an obsessive of counting at every meal. How many calories are in this? What's in this? What's in this? And a lot of people, it is sad because a lot of people do not realize that they're obsessing over their food choices until it gets to a point to where it's almost driving them crazy not to eat clean, or clean eating is not bad, but obsession over clean eating can develop into an eating disorder. So some signs of an eating disorder include sudden interest in fad diets, which are the diets that we discussed. And there are a few other fad diets. Those are just the main 5 fad diets. Obsession with clean eating, meaning that there's no room for any kind of one chocolate chip cookie or non-sugar-free creamer, or things like that. Things that we all enjoy and that are to be enjoyed in moderation. Binge eating is a sign of eating disorder. So that would look like all day telling yourself, I'm not going to eat this and this and this and this. And eventually just getting to a point most of the time at night where it's just a binge of whatever's in my pantry, whatever's in my fridge. I want all of it. I want the whole pint of ice cream. I want the whole sleeve of cookies, which a lot and is considered an eating disorder. An eating disorder doesn't just look like anorexia or anything like that. It can be, as I said, the binge eating where all day someone deprives themselves, and then at the end of the day, a lot of times whenever they are alone, the binge occurs. Another sign of eating disorder is compulsive exercise. So that would mean that a lot of people with an eating disorder, compulsive exercise looks like, okay, I ate 100 calories. I have to burn 200 calories. And it kind of views eating as your exercise to eat instead of you're exercising to move your body and to kind of clear your mind, get rid of some stress. There's guilt around a lot of food with an eating disorder. Any food that isn't low calorie, low fat, anything like that. There's a lot of guilt around eating that. And then specifically for those with diabetes, it can look like the misuse of insulin. So whether that means they're not using their insulin at all, or they are just or they're overusing their insulin to continue to bring their blood sugar down or balance it out. So you can find more in-depth details about eating disorders on the National Eating Disorder Organization. And also I've included at the bottom here, you'll see that if you or someone you know struggles with an eating disorder, there is a number that they have to call or text that you can talk to, because that's a very serious disease, and it luckily there are resources that we can use to talk that out with someone. So next, we're going to go into the benefits of intuitive eating. As you'll see, I included a group of people raising their hands, kind of like the victory thing. This reminds me of whenever in a Rocky movie, whenever he got to the top and he was cheering and everything. That's kind of what went through my mind with this picture. But it also shows that we're not meant to do this alone. You're not meant to only transition from restrictive dieting to intuitive eating on your own. It is meant to be a community, because we are meant to help one another and to be in community. And so that's why I included this picture of everyone, whether that be support from your coworkers, your family, your friends, or you can find a dietitian that is available at the student center as well, which I'm sure they can lead you to dietitians that are available for employees that can help you with how to intuitively eat, or if you're suffering with restricted dieting and eating disorder, how to transition out of that. But the benefits of intuitive eating include, I just included a few here, food freedom, increased self-esteem, and a positive relationship with food and your body image. And so here's some quick tips for intuitive eating. One thing that's super important is to give yourself permission to eat all foods. So that can look like, if you once thought that vegetables were bad because they're carbohydrates, or potatoes were bad because they're carbohydrates, maybe allowing yourself to have a sweet potato, because that is a very healthy form of complex carbohydrates, because it has a lot of fiber, beta carotene, a lot of good things in the sweet potato. And so you are supposed to give yourself permission to eat all foods, especially those that you once thought were bad. Another important one is to honor your body's hunger cues. Everyone has different hunger cues, and we will give a few common ones on the next slide. But what hunger cues can often look like are stomach growling, headache, fatigue, maybe shakiness. And then another how-to is to find movement that makes you feel good, whether that is going on a walk with your dog, doing yoga, doing a HIIT class, going on a walk, maybe if you're at a desk all day, getting up and walking for a few minutes every hour. Just things like that, movement that makes you happy, not necessarily something that you think that you have to do, but something that makes you feel good and makes your body feel good. So you may wonder, with intuitive eating, how do I portion? How do I listen to my body cues? What are my body cues? The main thing is to think of balance instead of calorie restrictions. So a good rule of thumb is to ask yourself, does my plate have a variety of colors? What does my plate look like? Is it just all white? Is it all green? Is it all any color, really? Is it all one color, or do I have a good mix? And you'll see that I included a plate here that kind of shows, it's from My Plate, if you've ever heard of that. That's an excellent resource to kind of get a general guide of what a plate should look like. So as you'll see, half of the plate is filled with fruits and vegetables, and then a fourth of the plate has whole grains, and then another fourth of the plate has protein, which you want to try and include lean protein, such as chicken, greater than 93% of hamburger or turkey meat, whichever one you get, those kinds of things. And so that's a good rule of thumb whenever you're thinking of what should my plate look like. Cheyenne, you're telling me all of these things to do, but realistically, what does that look like? And then another realistic thing is recognizing your own body cues. Like I said before, those can be fatigue, stomach growling, irritability. As you'll see here, I think this is just, I like the Snickers commercial. That's pretty funny. It's pretty accurate for myself, at least. Whenever I'm hungry, I'm angry. So maybe not necessarily a Snickers, but you're not yourself whenever you don't have carbohydrates that are going to give you energy, and things like that. And there are other body cues that are specific, and we'll talk about how you can learn those body cues and how to transition to intuitive eating. So some steps to food freedom, which is also just steps to intuitive eating, also some facts, is that on average it takes about 3 months to adjust from restrictive dieting to intuitive eating. So this is not something that is going to be done quick, which I'm a firm believer in that. If something's worth it, it's probably going to take a little bit. So investing 3 months, that is a while, but it will pay off in the fact that you have a positive relationship with food. You feel more freedom around food, and you also have an increased self-esteem because you're confident in the food choices that you're making are good and healthy for your body. So a good way to track your habits while you're trying to adjust to this new style of intuitive eating is to keep a food diary for the first few months. So things to include in the food diary can be how you felt whenever the hunger came on. So those would be your hunger cues. And then what was the average amount of time between your snacks or meals? And then how did you feel after eating certain foods? Because a lot of misconception with intuitive eating is that it's just eat whatever you want if you feel it makes you feel good. But in our reality, eating 3 donuts a day with all the sugar cannot lead to feeling very good. Anything like that. There's not a problem with rewarding yourself at all, but it is important to remember that even though you are finding food freedom, the balance of the food that you have, as we discussed in the previous slide, is very important to make sure that you're getting vitamins, minerals, the appropriate amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrates that your body needs to just perform at peak level, and also to help your own mind. So here is these next 2 slides are going to be before intuitive eating and then practice intuitive eating. So as you'll see, I've included what an average daily meal could look like before intuitive eating. And what I have on here just as an example is a blueberry bagel with 2 tablespoons of cream cheese, 8 ounces of coffee with, since it's fall, pumpkin spice creamer. And then for lunch, 8-count original chicken nuggets with medium fries from Chick-fil-A, 2 Chick-fil-A sauces, a medium half lemonade, half sweet tea. Dinner, a Hooligan's Philly cheesesteak gyro, and then a late night snack, 1 original glazed Krispy Kreme donut. And so you'll see over on the right side how our body reacts to these things. So with breakfast, after that, a common feeling is to feel bloated, to also have the caffeine rush because of the coffee and all the sugar in the pumpkin spice creamer, which is going to lead to a caffeine crash and then a sugar crash very shortly after, because the bagel, the cream cheese, the creamer, none of those have the fiber that you need to stay full until you have a snack or until you get to lunch. After the Chick-fil-A lunch, the feeling that could come about is greasy and dehydrated, because with the fries, there's a lot of sodium in the fries. The lemonade is not that the lemonade's bad for you, but it's very sour, which can leave you feeling, because of the sodium and everything, can leave you feeling dehydrated. For dinner, the dinner in the Hooligan, if you ever had a Philly cheesesteak gyro from Hooligans, it has bell pepper, steak. It is cooked in oil and has a lot of cheese, a lot of heavy stuff, heavy oils. And so that could lead to some indigestion and just feeling very heavy before bedtime. And the late night snack of the donut, with all the sugar that's going to be in the Krispy Kreme donut, can lead to being bloated, and then also a stomach ache right before trying to go to sleep. But whenever we are practicing intuitive eating, you'll see that with these switches in our daily meals, the body reactions are very different. So for breakfast, instead of the bagel, we have a piece of whole grain toast with peanut butter and then some blueberries on the side. We cut down on the caffeine. I like to have coffee too, so I completely understand, but maybe having half-calf coffee instead of fully caffeinated, and then getting sugar-free creamer. So you still have that taste, but it just doesn't lead to the sugar crash, the caffeine crash. The whole grain toast is going to have the fiber that's going to help you feel full for longer. And also the blueberries are a really good source of antioxidants as well. So that's the antioxidants, like we talked about, protect us from diseases. So that's a very good filling breakfast that still gets kind of that bagel kind of feel to it, just a healthier twist. And for lunch, still consuming the 8 chicken nuggets, because who doesn't like Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets? But instead of the fries, maybe choosing a side of kale salad or fruit cup. And then instead of Chick-fil-A sauce, which is going to have a lot of sugar, a lot of cholesterol in it, choosing honey mustard, which has a very similar taste, but is less calories, no added sugar, those kinds of things. And then choosing a water to keep us hydrated instead of that. And the result, as you can see on the right, is to feel full for longer, have no bloat, and then be hydrated. For dinner, and this is kind of just again, like a twist on the Philly cheesesteak, is 3 ounces of steak with the sauteed bell peppers, and then on top of a bed of brown rice. So you still get the Philly cheesesteak feel. You can even top it with a little bit of cheese to kind of get that creaminess in there, but instead doesn't have the heaviness of all the oils that's cooked in it, and everything like that. And then the late night snack, because I have a sweet tooth, and so I completely understand. I'm sure a lot of people have a sweet tooth at night, but a good kind of switch to satisfy that sweet craving and also keep you full and give you some good healthy fats is 1/4 of a cup of sweet and salty trail mix, which is going to cure sweet craving because it probably has M&Ms or something like that in it, but also has raisins, peanuts, almonds, sometimes those kind of things that are going to give us a healthy fat. So at the end, the main question is, why should I eat intuitively? And these are just 5 bullet points that I've came up with, is to feel full for longer, to have less bloat, improve your sugar craving, have more energy, and overall have a more positive relationship with food, especially with the holidays coming up. It's important to be able to know, okay, I am full right now. I don't have to eat this right now. I may be hungry later, but I don't have to stuff myself right now, which is hard to do. But with that, it'll help you feel more full at the holidays. And honestly, instead of feeling miserable, being super full, you can be full and sit there and enjoy more family time. And so that is the end of our presentation. And we have about, let me look at the time. It's 12:48, so we've got about 10 minutes for questions. And I appreciate all of y'all for coming today and for your time. It really means a lot. Okay, so are eggs still a good breakfast choice? Yes, I would say yes. I know that for eggs, a lot of people have the idea that there's a lot of cholesterol in eggs, but there is cholesterol in eggs, but eggs have been proven to have a good source of nutrients for your brain health, and also they're an excellent source of protein. And so, yeah, they're still a good choice. They, excuse me, I'm sorry, allergy season. They're still a good breakfast choice because unless you're consuming 12 eggs a day, then having 2 eggs for breakfast is not going to have a lot of cholesterol, and it's also not going to put you at risk for heart disease. So yeah, eggs are a super good choice, full of protein, full of nutrients for your brain, that are going to keep you going through the day, and can also be paired with toast or something like that. So they make a really good and versatile breakfast. Let's see. Okay. So Terry, what about Noom? Yeah, so Noom, I will say that I'm obviously not an expert on Noom, but from what I do know about Noom, they have registered dietitians that help you with the program. And so I know Noom that it is for weight loss, but from what I've seen, Noom is most of the time it doesn't have a restriction necessarily. It does a balance of all the macronutrients, and it also is more of a sustainable weight loss program versus the keto, where you drop weight very quickly and you have to maintain that very low amount of calories to keep the weight loss off. So I would say that for Noom, that could be something that you could talk to a dietitian with, given I am a student, but I have heard about Noom, and I do know like what I just said about Noom. And I think that from what I do know about Noom, it is more of a sustainable long-term program. Okay, so some comparisons related to food fat diets. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So if you, let me make sure I answer this correctly. So the question is, can you make some comparisons related to a few of the fad diets to be more intuitive? So with the fad, so fad diets are not intuitive. So, but a fad diet, say a keto diet, what that could look like is at breakfast you consume, excuse me, at at breakfast there's a lot of fat in that diet, and so it may look like only consuming. I know a lot of people would eat a lot of cheese on the keto diet, and so maybe that looks like just eating a few things of string cheese and then eating bacon or something like that, which is, so that would be an example of from what I know, from what I've heard also from people that do keto, for example, for one of the fad diets, would be an example is eating, having bacon with cheese and maybe putting like lettuce or something with it like that for breakfast. And so what that would look like more intuitively. So let's say for the keto breakfast, you had bacon, you had cheese, and that's really all. So you really just had you cooked your bacon in oil, and so you just have you have some fats, and that's about all. Oh, there's one new message. Okay. You have some fats and some protein, and that's about all. But so intuitively what that could switch to, which again, the fad diet is not an intuitive diet. And so it would look like if you do want bacon and cheese in your breakfast, maybe getting a piece of whole grain toast and putting an egg on it to give you some protein, choosing turkey bacon, which is going to be lower in sodium and cholesterol and have more protein in it, and using a reduced fat cheese, which is going to give you the protein at a lesser amount of fat. So I hope that kind of makes sense, but you can also look in the links that I included. All of them should have an example of what a meal kind of looks like on that fad diet. And then we can relate it to, okay, if only in that diet there's only protein and fat, then intuitively what I need to include is a source of carbohydrates. So our next question is, when is it an intuitive eating thing, and when might it be more of a medical thing? Okay, so when is it an intuitive eating thing, and when might it be more of a medical thing? So intuitive eating is going to be more of a choice that you make, that you definitely should consult your primary doctor or ideally a dietitian about, since they are the food experts. But intuitive eating is going to be just a choice that you make to get away from the restrictive dieting. Whereas if it becomes more of a medical thing, then for certain medical purposes, such as for children or adults with epilepsy, the keto diet has actually been proven to decrease their amount of epileptic seizures and like episodes and stuff like that. So that's one example of a when it would become more of a medical, whenever you need to go to a medical type of diet, would be that example right there. For epileptic patients, the keto diet has been found to decrease the amount of episodes that they have. Let's see. Okay, so I like red meat. Should I try to eat more chicken in my diet? Yeah, so I understand it's I feel like it's really easy in the South to eat a lot of red meat too. But I would try and eat more chicken, or even an alternative if you say you like to eat spaghetti a lot. That's just a recipe that comes to my head. I feel like that a lot of people eat a lot of, and it's very simple to make. If you like having the red meat meatballs in it, and you just like the texture of maybe red meat more than you do chicken, then an option could be using turkey meat, which is gonna is gonna be similar in the fact that it is a type of white meat, quote unquote, protein, and can give you the same amount of protein that chicken would give you in your diet. Our next question: would the green, red, and yellow bell peppers with a ranch dip be a good snack? Yeah, I think so. I think that obviously with the green, red, and yellow bell peppers, you're getting that beta carotene and lycopene that we talked about, which are great for preventing everyday illnesses such as the flu, the common cold, which I feel like I'm kind of suffering from right now. And then you're getting that the nutrients from those green vegetables as well. And with the ranch dip, yeah, I think that if another good option would be hummus, which is going to have more fiber, so that's going to help you be full for longer versus the ranch dip. However, if you do use the ranch dip, just try and look at if it's those prepackaged, like the Hidden Valley prepackaged options. Looking at the sodium, cholesterol, and saturated fat content. So if there's maybe a option that has less than 10% of saturated fat, that would be a good option for the ranch dip instead of if you don't like hummus, for example, because I know hummus is kind of iffy. You kind of have to get used to it. So yeah, overall, I think that would be a good snack, just keeping in mind with the ranch dip that you want to keep the saturated fat lower and also look at the added sugars. So more about fullness cues. Yeah, for sure. So I only know my own body, so that's all I'm going to refer to. But for fullness cues for myself, for example, it looks like a lot of just like, I feel satisfied, I guess. I don't know. It's more of a mental kind of thing for me. But also just kind of whenever I guess I can talk more about whenever you overeat more so, you can tell that maybe that looks like your stomach starts hurting or burping a lot or something like that. So that would be fullness cues are but yeah, you can look up fullness cues more in those in any article off of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Look more about fullness cues and also a website about intuitive eating. There are more kind of signs from the dietitians that founded intuitive eating on what fullness cues look like, more common ones look like. And is plant-based meat a fat or a genuinely good substitute? I think that it's generally a good substitute. The only thing to kind of keep in mind with the plant-based meat is that you are probably going to miss out on that on the folate and the vitamin B and vitamin D that come from a lot of meat-based proteins. So, and an option for that, if you are vegan or if you just prefer plant-based meat or plant-based protein over the over animal-based protein, is supplements that you can talk about with your doctor. I know that we want to try and keep away from supplements and get all of our nutrients from our dietary intake, but in general, just to keep in mind, if you are doing plant-based meat, to kind of include green leafy vegetables in your meal so that you can get that iron and folate that you might be missing out on. Let's look. Yeah, so I see on here Mira Jackson had a really good comment that ranch does have a lot of salt, but I like to make my own homemade ranch, and so a good alternative is to get Greek yogurt, and you can get fresh dill and garlic, which is pretty much all that's in ranch, and you can mix it up in just plain Greek yogurt, and that's going to obviously lower the sodium content and keep that saturated fat content low while giving you the taste of ranch, and something that you can make on your own. So it may honestly be cheaper to do that. Would have a tub of plain Greek yogurt, some dill from a market, and then some fresh garlic and stuff, and parsley that goes in ranch. All right, yeah, you can see that Carolyn included a more about fullness cues on here. So, yeah, if there's not more questions.
That was great. I know you had a lot of questions, so did a good job. All right. Well, I think this concludes. We ran a little bit over. Sorry about that, but we do appreciate the questions.
Yeah, thank
Glad
you.
that everybody seemed to really enjoy this presentation. So you did a great job, Cheyenne. All right. Well, everybody have a great weekend, and thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good weekend. Roll Tide. Let's beat Arkansas.
Bye-bye.